In the previous session, we have discussed about lead conversion mechanism, and we have discussed what exactly lead conversion process and how can we implement the lead conversion mechanism with a manual, how to convert the lead as a customer by using the convert button, and upon converting the lead as a customer by using this convert button, if I'm having more number of lead records which needs to be get converted, then how can we do that through automation? And we have discussed how to convert the bulk leads as the customers through programming with the help of database.lead convert class. So what exactly database.lead convert class and what it indicates, and what are the various methods that we have in database.lead convert class, and what is the significance of each and every method, and how can we use these methods in order to convert the leads as the customers through programming with the help of triggers we have discussed. Now, so in today's session, we are going to discuss about trigger handler factory. So what exactly trigger handler factory and what is the use, how to implement trigger handler factory, and what kind of benefits that we have with this trigger handler factory. Now let me explain. Now this feature is also called as trigger action framework. This is also called as logicless triggers. It is also called as logicless triggers. Now, trigger handler factory or trigger action framework or logicless triggers, all are same. So then what exactly this trigger handler factory? Now let me explain. For example, assume that I have prepared a trigger. I have prepared a trigger on my account object. I have prepared a trigger on my account object which will be getting fired on after inserting an account record. Once an account record has been inserted successfully, then I want to send one email notification to the account record owner. Whatever the account owner that we have, to that account owner, I want to send an email notification. So that I'm creating a trigger, and inside the trigger, I'm writing the business logic to send the email notification to the account owner with the required subject and the content, to address, CC address, BCC address, and the attachments also. To do all these things, whatever the features are required, we are going to be writing the business logic inside my trigger. Now, I'm preparing the trigger. Trigger, accounts trigger on account object, which will get fired on after insert. Now, I'm preparing a trigger with the name accounts trigger on account object, which will get fired on after inserting the record inside the object. So as usual, first of all, I'm checking the trigger context. If trigger dot is insert and the trigger dot is after. If the trigger has been really fired because of after insert event or not. If yes, then we are writing the business logic here. Write the business logic to send the email alert. Write the business logic to send the email alert to the account owner. to the account owner. So, in order to send the email notification to the account owner, whatever the business logic is required, the whole business logic I'm writing inside my trigger. Clear up to this one? Hmm. So now I have prepared this trigger. Now the trigger will be having the business logic to send the email notification to the account owner. This is my trigger. In this trigger, I have written the business logic. Now, so now tell me in this case, generally when this business logic will be getting fired, this business logic will be fired when a trigger has been fired automatically. Whenever the trigger has been fired, automatically this business logic will be getting executed. Can you invoke this business logic manually? No, because these are triggers. Triggers we can't invoke manually. If it is a normal Apex class method, we can call them manually by using class name dot method name. If it is a static method. If it is a non-static method, we can create the object of the class through object name dot method name. We can call the method. We can execute the logic. But this is a trigger. Trigger will be getting fired based on the DML event that is after insert. Once an account record has been inserted successfully, then only my trigger will fire. If the trigger is fired, this business logic will be getting executed. Okay? Understood the concept here? Now here my requirement is, as part of this business logic, whatever the business logic that you have prepared to send the email notification, this business logic I need in some other places also. Like for example, so here we have few other functionalities. We have a batch class. We have a schedule class. We have a Visual Force page. We have some other features are available as part of my application development. Now I'm having a batch class, batch class. This is also called as batch apex. And I have a schedule class, schedule apex. I have a Visual Force page. I have a Visual Force page. These are the features are available here. In my Salesforce R, we have a batch apex class, we have a schedule class, we have a Visual Force page. But now my requirement is, whatever the logic that I have written inside this trigger, the same logic I want in this particular batch class also, the same logic I want in my schedule class also, the same logic I want in my Visual Force page also. This is my requirement. What can I do? What can we do? Can you call this a trigger from all these places? No. Triggers we can't invoke manually. Triggers will be the automated processes which will get fired based on DML events. So we can't invoke them manually. We call them inside. We can't call inside the batch class, schedule class, Visual Force page. Then what can I do? Do I need to copy and paste this code? To achieve this functionality, we need to copy this code. We need to paste inside that. Copy the same code, paste inside the schedule class. Copy this code, paste inside the Visual Force page. So the same code is available in 4 places. The same code is available in trigger also, in batch class also, schedule class also, Visual Force page also. In 4 places, the same code is available. In that case, is it a duplicate code, right? Yes, because the same functionality is required in all these 4 places, so that we have copied and pasted this code inside this batch class, schedule class, and the Visual Force page. In that case, if you are writing the same code in multiple places, it's a redundant code, it's a duplicate code. which will occupy some more characters, which will take more time for compilation, which takes more time for execution, and ultimately it is impacting on my application performance. So in this case, how can we avoid this problem? How can we make my code generic? That means unique, only one. How to do that? Can you suggest me a way how to do this one? Any mechanism to make this code unique? Hmm. Any way to do this? Any alternative? Anyone? Think? No. Deduplication, that is for records. This is same code I want to use in these three places also here. So in this case, instead of copy and pasting this code in these three places, I want to make it reusable. How to do that? Anyway, simple concept. You know that. Hmm. How can you do that? Hmm. Okay, then what needs to be done? Okay, okay, right. In this case, what we can do, instead of writing this business logic inside the trigger, can we write this business logic inside a class? I want to prepare a class. In that class, I want to prepare a static method. In that static method, I would like to write this business logic. Now tell me, if the logic is available inside the method, can we call the method in all these four places or not? Yes. Suppose, for example, we have system.debug method. Can we call system.debug method inside the trigger? Yes. Can we use system.debug method in this batch class? Yes. In schedule class? Yes. In Visual Force? In yes. In everywhere we can call because it's a separate class method. Okay, system.debug is a method which is a reusable functionality which we can use in every program also wherever you want. Like the similar way here also, instead of writing this logic inside the trigger, because if I'm writing the logic inside the trigger, whenever the trigger is fired, then only this logic will be executed. But now I want this same logic in multiple places also. I want to call this logic in multiple places inside my application development so that I don't want to write this logic inside the trigger. I want to move this logic into separate class method. So I want to prepare a class. Here I'm preparing a separate class. Public class messaging helper class. Inside the class, I'm preparing a method. Public static void send email alert to account owner. I'm preparing a method. I'm preparing a method. So I'm preparing a class with the name messaging helper. In this class, I'm preparing the method send email alert to account owner. In this particular method, I would like to place this business logic. Whatever the business logic that you have prepared to send the email notification to the people, that business logic I want to place inside my method. Okay. Now, in this case, so now this is my class that we have. Now, in this class, I'm having this method. Now, I'm having this method is available. So now we have prepared a class. Inside the class, we have a prepared a method. In this method, we have written the business logic. If it is a class method, we can call the class method from any place in the world wherever you are. Now, the same logic is required inside my trigger also, so that I would like to call this. How can we call this method now? Tell me. Class name dot method name. Right, exactly. Now, because it's a static method, directly we can call this. Now, my class name is what? Messaging helper dot send email alert to account to work. That's it. So now we can call this a method inside the trigger also. Clear? Now the same method we are calling over here. Now the same method I want to use in my batch class also. Here also we can call this a method. The same logic I want to use it inside my schedule class also. I'm calling this method from here also. The same logic I want to call from Visual Force page also. So that I would like to place this functionality here also. That means what? Instead of writing the logic, okay, instead of writing the logic in each and every place, okay, separately, we are going to writing the logic only once. Now, the same logic we are calling in different places. This method we are calling from here also. The same method we are calling from here also. The same method we are calling from schedule class also. The same method we are calling from Visual Force page also. So that write the code only once. Write the code only once and then use this code in multiple places whenever you want, wherever you want. Now in this case, now tell me, inside the trigger, do we have any logic over here? No, there is no business logic available here. Where is the business logic? Business logic is available inside my class method. So my trigger does not have any logic. So this trigger is a logicless trigger. It doesn't have any business logic. Business logic has been migrated to a separate class method because if I'm writing the business logic inside the trigger, that business logic can be accessible only within the trigger, not from outside. For that reason, to make that business logic more reusable, we are writing the business logic inside the separate class methods. These methods we can call from the trigger, that is called as a trigger handler factory. This is also called as a trigger action framework. This is also called as logicless triggers. Okay, understood the concept over here? Now this is the functionality of okay trigger handler factory as part of your okay Apex program. Then how can we implement this? Okay, now let me show you. Okay, let me go to my Salesforce R. I'm going to my Salesforce R now. Now I'm going to my developer console. Let me open the trigger. So what is the trigger that we have prepared? Auto lead conversion trigger. This is the business logic that we have written inside the trigger. Now I don't want to write this business logic inside the trigger. I want to move this business logic to a separate class. In that case, what needs to be done? Prepare a separate class that is called as a handler class. Now, my trigger name is what? Okay, auto lead converted trigger. Now I'm preparing a handler class. Create an Apex class. Auto lead converted trigger handler. I'm creating a handler class because to indicate that this is a class which contains a method which can be called from this trigger auto lead converter trigger. For our easy identification, we are giving these names like this. Now this is a handler class. Now inside this class, prepare a method. Public static void. Now here we can give the method name. Now this is the logic I want to write inside the method. Now this logic will be executing on what event here? After update. So in that case, give the method name also same as your event name. I'm giving the method name as after update. So why I'm giving this method name as after update is you can give any name also whatever you want. But if I'm giving the name like as after update, then it is an indication to me this is a method which contains some business logic which can be used by the trigger auto lead converter trigger in after update event over here. For our easy identification, we are giving this kind of naming convention. You can give any name also, A, B, C, X, Y, Z, anything, whatever you want, you can provide no issues. But in that case, what is the problem? We don't know. Whenever if you are giving a different name, then we don't know in which event this method is getting called inside the trigger. We don't know that. For that reason, to give the easy identification, we are giving the trigger name as the method name over here. Whatever the trigger event name that we have, now this event name I'm giving as a method because it used to indicate this is a method which will be using by this particular trigger and then this business logic to be executed in this trigger and after update event. Now, once the method is ready, then copy this code. Don't copy these context variables here. This context variable will be as it is here. Inside the context, whatever the logic that you are written, copy the whole logic. Copy the whole logic here, paste inside this. Copy the whole logic and then paste inside this. Clear? Now save it. Now it will raise some compilation errors. What is the compilation error over here? It is indicating trigger.new. Trigger.new is what? It's a context variable. That already told you trigger context variables can be accessible within the trigger only. But this is what Apex class. Inside the Apex classes, trigger context variables can't be accessible. Whatever the 12 trigger context variables that we have, those context variables accessibility will be within the trigger only here. Now in this case, what needs to be done? This trigger.new is what? It's a list collection. List of what? Lead. So now replace this trigger.new with list of lead records. So whatever the context variable that we have, this context variable we can pass it as parameter. Here I'm preparing the parameter. List of what? Lead. LST. Now this parameter we can able to replace. Okay, replace this trigger.new with LST leads. That's it. Over. Now we have prepared the business logic over here. Now class is ready. So now once the class is ready, then call this method from your trigger. Auto lead converted trigger handler dot what is the method here? After update. Here we need to pass list of lead records. These lead records we can access how? Trigger dot new. That's it. Over. So whatever the lead records you are trying, whatever the lead records you have updated just now, those records will be available in trigger.new context variable. Those records we are going to pass into the method as a parameter. Now these list of lead records will store into your collection. It will collect the collection records. It will be checking the conditions. Will convert as a customer automatically. That's a simple concept. Okay, this is called as trigger handler factory. So instead of writing the logic inside the trigger, we can make the trigger should be logicless. Trigger doesn't have any logic. The logic is available inside this class method. Now whenever we are firing the trigger, trigger will call this a method. The method is going to be firing. It will be performing the respective operations. Okay, this is called as trigger handler factory as part of your Apex program. Clear? Understood the concept now? Now, make a note of this one. trigger handler factory. While implementing the business logic inside the trigger, it will get executed upon firing the trigger only based on the DML event. But we can't access this business logic from outside of the trigger. Outside of the trigger. To make the business logic more usable, we can write the business logic inside the Apex class method, and we can reference the method from different places of the application development. And we can reference the method from different places of the application development. Which is called as trigger handler factory or logicless triggers. I'm indicating. Handler class, trigger code. Done with this part over here? Now, next one. Next one, we have two theoretical points are available here. But these are not new. You know that concept here. In each and every feature, I have explained those information. But now I have consolidated all the things at one place. That's it, nothing else. So whenever we are working on the triggers, in the interview point of view, also they will raise a common question. Upon writing the trigger code, what kind of best practices we used to follow? Like while preparing that Apex classes, variables, everywhere, I told you please follow some standards, coding standards, naming conventions also. Okay, use this kind of naming conventions for variables and for methods, for classes. Upon using SOQL queries, I told you some best practices. Upon using DML statements, I told you some best practices. These are all are comes under trigger best practices. Now, so whenever we are implementing the triggers, we need to follow some best practices. What are those best practices we used to follow? Now let me explain. I have listed out all the best practices at one place over here. These are few best practices here. These are theoretical points. These points are not new. Okay, I think already you are aware of this one. All these things we have discussed. Now the first one. The first point is trigger should support bulk records as well. That means that I already told you whenever we are creating a trigger, don't find the trigger for each record separately. Make the trigger should be bulkified trigger. Even though I'm inserting one record, even though I'm inserting multiple records also, my trigger should be able to handle multiple records processing as well. So that's what here I told you trigger bulkification concept. So that here, that is the first point. So that here, whenever we are processing the records through triggers, don't find the trigger for each record separately. Make the trigger to be fired only once. It should collect all the records which you are trying to process. It will place into the context variable. From that context variable, it will iterate that collection from starting to ending, collect each record, validate the data. It will show the messages to the people. So that please make sure that your trigger should be always a bulkified trigger. That is the first best practice. Second one, check for null pointer exception. From the beginning of your Apex programming, I'm keep on telling you, whenever we are using any parameters, please check that whether parameter is null or not. We are comparing with equals to null, not equals to null, and not equals to empty. Because adding those kind of conditions will avoid so many exceptions. Suppose if the parameter value is empty, it will throw an exception. To avoid such kind of exceptions, adding these kind of conditions are very, very important. So that here, adding these kind of conditions will be avoiding so many null pointer exceptions over there. Now, so that here, as a best practice, please check for null pointer exceptions always. Next, always use try catch blocks to handle the exception. This is the next topic over here. We'll see that part here. Exception handling mechanism. That already told you in our starting classes of conditional statements, whenever if you want to handle some exceptions, there are two ways are available. Conditional statements, second one, exception handling mechanism over here. Now, that already told you over there. Like when you go to that conditional statements, I have explained to you here. In order to handle these exceptions, we have two ways, conditional statements, exception handling mechanism. Conditional statements feature already we are done. If condition, switch statement, all these things. Exception handling mechanism we'll see okay when moving forward. Now, so that here we are using try catch blocks to handle those exceptions over here. Now, next one. This is the trigger context variables here. Differentiate the events okay with a separate code blocks to avoid the usage of trigger.new and trigger.old. That means that already told you here, even though your trigger may be firing on multiple events also, segregate that logic into separate blocks by adding the proper context variable. So now for before insert, I want to execute some piece of code. After insert, I want to execute some piece of code. So segregate the code by adding the proper context variables. That process also we have discussed. Now this point I no need to explain to you. You already know. Don't write any SOQL queries and DML statements inside the for loop. Always we have to write them outside the for loop so that here we can avoid governor limit exceptions. Similar fashion here also. Don't write SOQL queries and SOSL queries inside the for loop. Always we have to write outside. Next one. We have to maintain minimum 75% of the code coverage here. This is for unit testing. This is the last topic of development. There we will see this point over here. And the next one. Avoid the recursiveness inside the triggers. That means here, whenever we are writing this trigger business logic, please avoid recursiveness. That means recursive means what? First trigger will be firing the second trigger will firing the first one, and again first one will fire the second will fire the first one. This kind of recursive manners we need to avoid by adding proper conditions over here. Now, the next one here. As a best practice, it is always recommended by the Salesforce, don't write multiple triggers on the same object. Better to create only one trigger per an object. Better to create only one trigger per an object. So why? Because is, for example, I have an account object. I have an account object. Once an account record has been getting inserted, I want to send one email alert. I want to send one SMS alert. Once an account record has been inserted, I want to send one email alert to the account owner. I want to send one SMS alert to the customer also. So to send the email notification, I'm writing one trigger one. To send the SMS notification, I'm writing one more trigger two. When this two will fire? After insert. This is also firing on after insert because once the record has been inserted successfully, then only I would like to send that. Now this SMS notification also I want to send after insert here. Now I'm preparing two triggers, trigger 1 and trigger 2 both are on account object which will be firing on after insert. Now whenever I'm inserting a new record inside my account object, once a record has been inserted successfully, these two triggers will be getting fired. Because both are firing on after insert only here. So once the record is inserted, after inserting the record, triggers will fire. In which order these triggers will fire? Which one will fire first? Trigger 1 or trigger 2? How can we decide? I want to fire trigger 1 first, then I want to fire trigger 2 next. Or sometimes I want to execute trigger 2 first, then I want to execute trigger 1 next. But in this case, in Salesforce, we can't decide which trigger has to be executed first. And that too, we don't have any such options in Salesforce to control the execution order of the triggers. Which trigger has to be executed first, which trigger should be executed next, we can't decide that. There is no such options in Salesforce. Salesforce won't have any such kind of features to control the order of execution of the trigger. For that reason, don't write multiple triggers on the same object with the same event. Write this whole business logic within a single trigger itself. Okay, that's what here, because we don't have any options in Salesforce to control the execution order of the trigger. So that always prepare only one trigger for an object over here. In that trigger, write that business logic in whatever the order you want to execute. If you want to execute email notification first, then write that logic first, then write SMS logic over there. Okay. Next one, the last point here, today's concept here. Whenever we are writing the business logic inside the triggers, don't write the business logic within the trigger. Please follow trigger handler factory. That means instead of writing the logic within the trigger, write the logic inside a separate class method. Call that method from the trigger whenever you want, wherever you want. So that if the same logic is required in different places also, we can reference them just by using class name dot method. Okay. So these are the 10 best practices that we used to follow upon writing the trigger code. Okay. Understood the concept here? Next. Next one. Next one, trigger order of execution. So what is the order of execution as part of this trigger? Now let me explain. For example, assume that I have an object. I have an object. So this is an account object. I have an account object. Now on this account object, I have prepared validation tool. I have prepared validation tools. And on this account object, I have created roll-up summary fields. I have prepared roll-up summary fields also. On this account object, we have prepared formulas. On this object, I have created some sharing rules. I have created some sharing rules. On this object, I have created triggers. On this object, we can create workflow rules. We can create workflow rules. On this object, we can create process builders. We can create process builder. On this object, we can create lightning flows. Lightning flows. So on a single object, we can create these many number of automation tools. Now generally, all these features will be firing when lightning flows will be firing on after insert. That means after. Validation rules are firing on before. Okay, before insert, before update. Roll-up summary will be firing on after, after insert, after update like that. Formulas are also firing on after insert, after update. Sharing rules are also firing on after insert and after update. Triggers are firing on before also, after also. Workflow rules are always firing on after insert. Process builders are also firing on after insert. Now, in this case, these are the various triggering points over here. Now, so whenever we are having these many number of automation features on a single object, once an account record has been inserted successfully, after inserting the record, okay, whatever the after features are available, those will get fired. Like your lightning flows, roll-up summaries, formula, sharing rules, your triggers, workflows, okay, process builder, all these things will be getting fired. Now, upon firing all these automation rules, in which order will be getting executed here? Which one will execute first? Will trigger will execute first? Or roll-up summary will execute first? Or flow will execute first? Or is sharing rule will execute first? Or workflow will execute first? Which will execute first? What is the sequence of order it will be getting executed? This is called as order of execution. So for that reason, Salesforce has given an order of execution over here. Now let me show you the diagram over here, so which you can understand very easily. So now as part of this order of execution, let me explain this. Now, so now this is the order of execution over here. Here we have divided three categories over here. Salesforce server, that means this will be preparing the Salesforce server itself automatically. Second one, our triggers through development. Third one, out of the box automation tools. That means our validations, roll up summary, formula, these are preparing through mouse clicks over here. Okay, this is from by using configuration admin part. This is with the development part here. These will be preparing the Salesforce automatically here. Now, in which order it will be executing over here, let me explain. First of all, whenever you are trying to be inserting a record or updating the record inside the object, first of all, before trigger will execute first. Always before trigger will execute first. Once the before trigger has been executed first, then it will be executing system validations here. Whatever the validations have been prepared by Salesforce, those will get filed. Generally, when Salesforce will prepare, upon creating a field, I have selected the required checkbox to make that field mandatory. Whenever we are selecting required checkbox, on that field, Salesforce will create one validation rule automatically. Those will be getting filed. Upon creating the field, I have selected that field data type as email. On that field, it will be having some validation to check the email ID format over here. So that is preparing the Salesforce. So these kind of system validation rules will be getting filed first. First of all, before trigger will file first, then your Salesforce prepared validation rules will execute. Then it will execute your custom validation rules. Then it will execute your custom validation. Whatever the validation rules that you have prepared, those will get executed. Once it is validating that, then it will be executing duplication rules. In order to implement the duplication, to avoid the duplications, okay, whatever the duplication rules given by Salesforce, those will be getting executed. Then it is going to be saving the record inside your database without committing the transaction. The record will be getting saved. Still, the transaction is not yet committed over here. Because once the record is saved, it will execute after triggers here. It will execute after triggers. Once after trigger has been getting performed the operation, it will execute assignment rules. It will assign the record to the respective user. That means it will transfer the record to the respective people. Once the record has been transferred, then it is going to be sending the email notification with the help of auto response rules. Then once the record has been send auto response notification, then workflow rule will get filed. Once the workflow has been updating the field, once the workflow has updated the field, then immediately it is going to be executing that before trigger and after trigger over here one more time. Now, once the before trigger and after trigger are executed one more time, then it will execute the process builder, it will execute the flows. Once the flows has been executed, then it will execute escalation rules. Then after that, it will be executing entitlement rules. Then your roll-up summary fields and your sharing rules will get filed. Then it will be committing all the transactions into your DML transactions into your data. Once it is done, it will send that post DML operation, like as sending the email notification. All these things will be executing at the last. Once all the operations are done successfully, then only it will be executing the DML operations. Over here, it will be sending the email notification to the people. This is the order of execution given by Salesforce. So, in this case, you no need to remember the complete picture over here. In the entry point of view, they will be raising the question. On an object, I have a validation rule, I have a trigger, I have a workflow, I have a process builder, I have a flow, and then I'm having that sharing rule. In which order it will execute here? Always before trigger will get executed first, then your custom validation rules, then workflow rules, then process builder, and then flows, and finally your sharing rules will be getting filed. This is the order of execution. Just you can remember these points over here. That is enough. No need to remember the complete picture over here. Okay. For your reference, I will share this picture also so that you can able to refer this picture whenever it is required for you. This is the order of execution following by Salesforce internally. So we need to follow this architecture. Okay. These are the various of features are available as part of your Apex programming as part of triggers. So now in triggers, we are having all the points are very, very important. Before going to the interview, don't skip even a single point from the trigger. Like what exactly the trigger, why should we go for the trigger, and the trigger syntax. And then second one, trigger events. So what are the various 7 events that we have for trigger, and in what situation which event will be used? That is most important. Then types of triggers, like as before triggers, after triggers. How to deactivate the trigger, how to reactivate the trigger, how to delete the trigger. That is the next one. And then we are going to be discussing about trigger context variables. So what trigger context variables are available here? What is the use of context variables? In that one, mainly they will be asking about difference between trigger.new, trigger.new map, trigger.old, trigger.old map. Difference between trigger.new, trigger.old. These questions are very, very common questions. And then we have the concept of trigger handler factory. And then we have trigger best practices. And then order of execution. All these points are very, very important as part of your triggers. Don't skip even a single point before going to the interview and triggers topic here. Every point is very, very important as part of your triggers in the interview point of view and in the implementations also. Okay. So this is the concept of trigger. With this one, we are done with the triggers concept over here. Okay. Now, in tomorrow's session, I'm going to discuss about a feature called as email programming. Then, what exactly the email programming, how to send the email notifications to the people through Apex programming, we'll see practically in tomorrow's session. Okay? Because don't miss the email programming concept here. Email programming concept is the base for your next topic here. Next topic will be asynchronous programming. There we are going to discuss about 5 topics over there, like batch programming, scheduling, future methods, queuable interface, and then flex queues. Okay, 5 features are there. For these 5 features, email programming is the base. Because as of now, we have prepared the business logic inside the class. We went to the execute anonymous window. We are executing the method. We can see the result in debug log file. But for this asynchronous programming, okay, results we can't see inside the debug log file. Debug log file will not work. In order to get the result of your asynchronous operations, we need email programming mandatorily. Through email notifications only, we can see the results. So that here, email programming is the base. Don't miss the tomorrow's topic here. That is most important. Okay. Once the email programming is done, then we will enter into the concept of batch programming, scheduling, and all these things. Then we'll see the small features like as custom settings, custom metadata types, and then SOSL queries also, relationship queries, everything I will cover as part of this. Okay. Now, don't miss the topics from now onwards here. These are very, very important here. Thank you.
Hello, sir.